Welcome to Tea Talks, where young adult stories and church experience come together into a beautiful blend to give us insight. So grab a cup, sit down, relax, and enjoy while we spill the tea. With me today, I have my good friend, Rachel. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us, for accepting to make this video series. So let's start getting to know you a little better. Okay. Why don't you share with us who you are?
So I'm Rachel Stanaway. I'm a mom of 3 boys, 11, 7, and 3. I'm a wife to my husband of almost 9 years. And and I'm a pastor's kid too.
You are a pastor kid. Yeah. I've been to your house. Beautiful, lovely house.
Thank you.
Beautiful family. Loved meeting everybody. Let me start with the hard topics.
Yes.
How was it growing up in a church, being a pastor's kid?
Well, it wasn't the easiest. I feel like a lot of times you end up being a shadow of your parents in some ways. Just trying to follow all the rules and make all the right moves. And so it's definitely a challenge being your own person, I feel like, in some ways, being a pastor's kid.
Yeah. What was the pressures? Share a little bit. What did you feel as you were growing up?
I think the expectations were very high, that you would be a perfect role model for everyone, that you would always follow all the rules. And I think the hardest part was just the minute you messed up, there were so many eyes on you. And it wasn't always the most, accepting of the mistakes and accepting that you're still human and that it's still okay, regardless of your dad and who he is.
So you feel like, well, I do know that young people today, doesn't matter if they grow up in a church, outside of the church, with pastor kids or not, I think there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
But you feel like it was more because of being a pastor kid?
Definitely. I think so, for sure. I think there's more eyes on you. There's higher expectation. I think a lot of people expect you to be a good role model for their children, and so they definitely look up to you in that way.
Do you feel like you were able to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I would say to an extent. Until later on in high school, I think finally it really got to me, and eventually, right after high school, I would say I probably left church for a little while.
Yeah.
Because of it, yeah.
Do you want to share an experience of what happened in high school?
Well, I became a very young mom right out of high school, and I feel like I always kept a very outward perfect appearance of who I was as a person and strive to be. But life has its challenges. And so I would say after that and that becoming public, it was much harder. I think I got to know who my true friends were, and a lot of people that I always looked up to didn't talk to me again. And there was a lot of, talking behind my back type of stuff. And it was definitely a challenge for me.
So if you don't mind, because I was a single mom when I was 16 years old. So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is that you got pregnant before you got married. Is that what happened?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
High school sweetheart, yeah.
So a lot of people just, I know exactly what it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I went through the same situation. Parents, obvious, and I was not raised in a Christian family.
Yeah.
So, but it's a cultural thing. It's not only about being a Christian, not being a Christian. It's a cultural thing that, hey, if you get pregnant and you're not married.
Yeah.
Which, let's be real, it's not a perfect situation.
Yeah.
I look back and I was like, I wish I had done things differently. But how do you feel like a church family should have approached that situation with you?
I think the hardest part for me was the fact that I wasn't doing anything different that a lot of my friends were doing. It was just the fact that mine became very public and became an obvious thing. So it was definitely talked about a lot, and I feel like I would have looked at it a lot differently if I was accepted. And it was a very hard time for me. It was definitely not ideal, and it wasn't necessarily a healthy relationship. And so it was one of the toughest part of my life. And I think as a church, I expected those people who had watched me grow up, that they would have really surrounded me in that time and been there for me in my hardest time, but instead it was the complete opposite. It was just, oh, we'll pray for you from a distance. Good luck, kind of.
You felt abandoned.
Yes, very much so.
I understand, and it must have been really hard for you.
Yeah.
How are you today?
Very good. Very good. I have definitely, I think there was a big gap of me looking at the church as not the people within it, but my relationship between God. And it's not about them, they're also human. And so I think I just had to really kind of change my view that church isn't everyone that's inside. In some ways it should be, but it's not, and it's about you and God, and he was still there for me very much.
That is good. This brings me very close to home because I've been through an experience like that, and not having the church family that you grew up with supporting you, it must have been very, very hurtful. Yeah. I didn't have a church family, period, because we didn't go to church, but I had abandonment of my friends, you know. Yeah. Not that they didn't like me, it's just because our lifestyle now is completely different. Now I have a baby, you know, and with time, we were completely disconnected and I felt very lonely. Yeah. So yeah, I feel for you. When you're talking about this, it's very difficult. Now going more towards the topic that I wanted to talk with you, it's actually inspired in this book here that is called Growing Young. This is a group of researchers from the Fuller Institution that they started trying to figure out, okay, what is happening? Why is it that the research shows that after high school, about a year after high school, we're losing about 50%. And this is in all denominations. This is not just one denomination. This is throughout North America. Why is it that we're losing all of our young adults? And what the churches that are doing well, what are they doing, you know, to keep the young adults? So one of the characteristics that they notice is churches that have what they call keychain leadership. In other words, churches that empower the young people. So what does empowerment means to you personally?
I would say it's trust. I think it's trusting that despite your mistakes and the areas that they may look at you and think that you're not where you should be to be able to be a part of that leadership. I think it's accepting them where they are and just giving them trust to be a part of something. Because with involvement and feeling empowered and feeling involved and accepted where you are, comes that growth, comes that change later on. And it's not for them to get to where you think they should be and then involve them. It's involve them and that change will come later.
I think that's what discipleship is, right?
Yes, yes.
Sometimes I look at it, even in like schools or something like that. Sometimes we, the older generation or the teacher or the pastor, we want them to come, the kids, the younger people, to come already perfect. Yeah. And that's not what God called us to do. God asked us to make disciples. They didn't come ready. Exactly. You know, we have to walk side by side. Yeah. Can you describe some specific moments where, either in this church or a different church you were before, that you felt like the church was not empowering you?
I would say definitely when I found out I was pregnant, I was very much involved in high school before that. But once I became pregnant, it was a censorship thing that I guess they had in place. I don't know if it's still in place, but it was just basically a church would come together and discuss what you were allowed to be involved in now that you have committed this obvious sin. And certain things like, you know, being up front wasn't really allowed anymore. And I was very much involved in like singing up front and such. I couldn't like hold any...
Because pregnancy is contagious, right?
Yes, yes, of course, apparently. So it's like being a teacher in Sabbath school, that wasn't like something I was allowed to be involved in anymore. So I think it was, instead of giving me a reason to stay, it was giving me all the reasons of why I was no longer needed there, really.
And I apologize, I don't want to be disrespectful to the cultures and the things like that. It's just because this is so close to home to me. One of the things that I notice is that when somebody in the church makes a mistake, we make these rules that unfortunately do exactly what you just said. You know, instead of like, okay, she made a mistake, but we want her here with us. We are more concerned with what is this going to look like. People, the leaders of the church is like, they're going to think we have no control. Hey, That's not the reality. Kids, if they decided they wanted to have sex and they're going to do things, they are going to do it. But if they don't trust you, if they don't come to you, they're going to do these things without the guidance of somebody that loves them.
Exactly.
So it makes it even worse.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Worse off than I already did, because of course there was a lot of shame and guilt that I was already putting on myself, especially being a pastor's kid. That was definitely a challenge. But then to receive it also from the church, those that are supposed to be my mentors and my leaders, very lost, really.
Yeah. Now let's switch a little.
Okay.
Can you share a time when you felt empowered?
I'd say that probably didn't come until more recently. I think I kind of, in some ways, took a back seat and just focused on my kids and my son. But they have always been like my motive for wanting to be involved in church and wanting them to have that safe space. And so I think that's now why it's so important to me to create that for them. So it was probably not until 10 years later, more recently, that I moved back to my home church and really been trying to get involved. And we're still in the process, I would say, of getting that leadership. It's definitely been a struggle as a young group trying to get involved and take, different roles that older generation has had for so long. We're still in that challenge, but we're definitely getting there. And I think that they've done a really good job as giving those stepping stones of letting us get involved more.
Even if they're not there, at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, definitely. There is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, in a lot of places, you don't even have that.
No.
And just this little light of hope, how does that makes you feel?
Really good. It's definitely been a struggle, but I would say it's that little bit of hope is giving us so much more empowerment to just keep going, that it's not going to be easy, but it'll be worth it. And I think just looking at the younger generation and how they're already, we've had many young kids pick up music lessons because they want to be a part of the praise team that we've built. And just, you already see it starting to go down to the younger generation. I think that's the biggest why we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and one of the things that we wanted to do, and the reason I'm mentioning the book and everything, is because we want to help our church learn how to grow together. The focus is not only in a younger generation, because I think our generations in the church are important, but the problem is when we have this divide, when we have this huge gap. But what we need to do is, how do we empathize? How do we learn what the young adults, the young people, and then the younger ones, how do we get them involved and wanting to be at church, so it doesn't happen situations like you shortly described, that you left the church for a while and now you're back. Do you feel like this empowerment that you're starting to see had a play on you coming back?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say my kids have definitely been my biggest push to stay involved. There's been many times that, it's easy to just want to throw up your hands, okay, I'm just going to stay in the pew and not get involved and not face those battles. But I know that what I went through should have never really happened. And I don't want that to be the future. And if something doesn't change, that will be the future for my kids. And I want them to have a home that even if they leave for a while and make a mistake, they know they can always come back.
Do you feel that experience taught you something that you are doing or will be doing different with your kids?
Yeah, I think it's definitely taught me to just parent with grace and letting them know that, life's full of mistakes and that it's okay to make those. And you learn from them. You really do. I learned so much from I guess you could call it mistake, but really he was my greatest blessing. But it's definitely taught me to just keep pushing forward, keep showing that God is always ready, open arms, and we as a church need to also be that way.
I think a parent or a more conservative leader that is watching us, the first thing they're going to say is what is she saying? Is she saying like me, when I made the comment? Where do you see that fine line between have more grace but still hold God's principles?
I would say that I feel like there's a kind of a misconception of young adults that there's not standards, that we don't abide by certain morals or values, and that's not the case at all. We still hold those. It's just we understand that in life you have, mistakes. It's not easy. You're gonna have an oops, and that you can still always come back to God, and you can always come back to the family, and they will be there to lean on.
Good. Last question.
Yes.
What would you say for another young lady or another young man that are struggling with the same things that you struggled with?
I would say just keep your faith with God, like keep your relationship with Him. Don't look at the people, because we're all human. We're always going to fail each other, and just know that even though they believe what they're doing is their best, they are still fall short, just as we have. And just to keep your head up and grow that relationship with God, and look at that and don't look at them.
Very good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Rachel, I had such a great time talking to you, getting to know you a little more. I hope we can do this again. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for you at home, thank you for joining Tea Talks. Keep stirring up the conversations and embracing the beautiful and the messiness of life. And until next time.